Hello again, everybody. This is Chris DeCubelis again, and today we're going to talk about past production hens. Last time that I was able to visit with you, we talked a little bit about 4-H poultry judging, and part of that is judging past production hens. Now, what does that mean? That's a funny word, past production. So what if I told you that I could evaluate a group of chickens, each chicken in that group, and pretty accurately determine how many eggs that chicken has laid based on some things that we're going to learn about? Well, that's true. We can do that, and we do that in 4-H poultry judging. So we have in 4-H poultry judging, you will have a group of 4 chickens, and then you're going to look at those chickens, and I'm going to tell you how to look at those chickens and how to evaluate those chickens. And you would rank them from the best layer to the worst layer. And so how we do this is, first of all, we're going to examine bleaching. Now, what does bleaching mean? Bleaching is we're going to look at the pigment loss in some very specific areas on the chicken, not their feathers, not their feathers. The feathers stay the same color, but we're going to look at their skin and some of their different parts of their bodies to see how much they've bleached out. And so chickens have yellow feet, yellow beaks. Typically, a lot of breeds of chickens that are egg layers, commercial egg layers, have yellow pigmentation in their beaks and their skin and their feet and legs. And as they lay, that starts to bleach out. And after they've laid, say, 220 eggs in a year, they're almost white in their beak and white in their skin and white in their feet and legs, because the yellow pigmentation leaves them and goes in, a lot of it goes into the egg yolk. You see, it's egg yolk's yellow too. And so that bleaches out over time. Another thing that we look at is handling quality. And what handling quality is you evaluate basically what condition the chicken is in as far as her weight. Is she carrying a lot of extra fat? If she is, she's probably not a very good layer, because by the end of her lay period, she should be pretty thin, because she puts a lot of energy and a lot of her body's effort into laying eggs. And then also abdominal capacity. How big is her tummy, basically? And there's some different ways to do that. And then you look at molt. Has she lost feather? Chickens will go through a lay, or any bird, any avian species will go through a period of lay, and then they'll, after their lay period's over, and then a while, they would sit on their eggs, and then they would go through what we call molt, where they shed a lot of feathers and then grow new feathers. So you can tell if they're molting that they're not currently in a period of lay. So you want our very productive hens to put off molting as long as possible. And we have a particular way that we evaluate molt in chickens. And so we're going to mostly talk about bleaching. Now, to talk about bleaching, it's good to know, and this slide here will show you the parts of a chicken. Now, you don't need to memorize all of these parts, but in order to evaluate bleaching, chickens, as they lay eggs, and this has been researched, and this is scientific knowledge, that as chickens lay eggs, they bleach out in a very specific order, and all chickens bleach out in the same order. So if they're bleached, you can see, when you learn this order, you can see how far they've bleached and how good of layers they are. So here's the order that they bleach out in. All chickens do this: vent, eye ring, earlobe, beak, bottom of the feet, entire shank, hocks, and tops of toes. And so if they're bleached out all the way, they're almost white throughout all their hocks and tops of toes, then you know that that's a very good layer. If they're only bleached out through their earlobe, but their beak's still yellow, the bottom of their feet's still yellow, their shank's still yellow, the hocks and tops of toes are still yellow, they're not such a great layer if they're the same age as the ones that are all the way bleached out through the tops of their toes. Does that make sense? So we use this information to evaluate the chickens. And basically, if you look, one of the last things that bleaches out is their shank, which is kind of the bottom portion of their leg, the scaly part, and then their hocks and tops of toes. The hock is just above the shank. You kind of fold the feathers back and look there, and then you look at their toes and the bottom of their feet. If that's all bleached out, that's a great layer. And we'll see some pictures of this in a little bit. But I used to, when I was coaching poultry judging teams, I would have them kind of remember this chant: vent, eye ring, earlobe, beak, bottom of the feet, entire shank, hocks, and tops of toes. And I would spend a long time having them memorize this, because when they're judging the chickens, they need to evaluate all of those areas to make sure they're bleached out, or where, to what degree each one of these areas is bleached out. And so that's one of the biggest indications of good laying, and it's probably the most important, is the understanding bleaching and the order of bleaching. And so here we see a couple of chickens, and I want you to look at these chickens. There's two birds here. These are white leghorn hens. These are the kinds of chickens that you would see on a commercial egg farm here in Florida and all over the United States. So when you go into a grocery store and buy a carton of white eggs, there's a very good chance that those eggs were laid by white leghorn hens, like the two you would see here. And of course, we only see their hocks and their shanks. But I think it's pretty evident if you can see which bird is the best layer here based on bleaching. So which one of these two chickens is bleached the most in her shank? Take a minute and look. Okay, here's the answer. So number one is a better layer than number two because she's more bleached out. So using this information on bleaching, you can pretty much determine most of the time which hen is a better layer by which hen is the most bleached out. Well, you say, well, what if there's a tie? What if both hens are bleached out all the way through their hocks and tops of toes? Well, then you would get into other things like handling quality, which chicken has the least amount of fat. And then you would get into abdominal capacity, which chicken has the biggest tummy. And we feel that with our fingers to see which chicken has the biggest abdomen. And typically the chickens with larger abdomens are better layers and they can lay larger eggs, which are more valuable. And then finally, if all of that is a tie, we look at molt. And if there's a bird, we look at the primary feathers. There's 10 primary feathers from the wingtip to the middle of the wing. And if any of those 10 feathers are missing, we determine that that hen is in a molt. And so that's how we judge past production hens. And so if you have chickens at home, or if you ever are out and look at somebody's chickens, you can look at them. I want you to pay attention to their shanks. That's the easiest place to see. And look at how bleached out their shanks are. And that way you can help determine if that's a good layer or not.